Hi there, and welcome to the latest interview in our Behind the Email series of interviews. Now, this is where we speak to industry experts and thought leaders on how they use email marketing and CRM to drive sales in their business. My name's Simon Washbrook, and I'm the founder of Popcorn, the customer conversion software that's really simple to use and tells you exactly when your customers are ready to buy and why. And today I'll be talking to Andy Bounds, who is an award-winning communications and sales expert, which I could do with some help with at the moment, a best-selling author and an international speaker. Did I about cover it all, Andy?
Everything I've ever done. Yes, thank you.
Excellent. So before we launch into all the questions, could you tell us a bit more about yourself and a bit more about your business, so people have got a good position for the people that don't know you?
Sure. Okay. Thank you. So basically, it's my job to help companies sell more, and that's it. So sometimes it's done by training, sometimes it's done by helping them with their messaging, sometimes it's done by speaking at the sales conferences or coaching their sales leaders. But ultimately, by the time I've gone, their sales have gone up. That's my job. And so, yes, being an author kind of helps, because sometimes people will want me to help them with their email creation or their RFP creation and so on. The reason I guess I know more about this than quite a few people is to do with my family background. My mum's blind. So when I was learning to speak, when I was 2 or 3 years old, the person who taught me to speak can't see. So without even trying, I learned how to communicate from someone else's point of view. So obviously mum doesn't see the world at all. She certainly doesn't see the world the way I do. Well, when we speak to customers, they don't see the world the way we do either. So speaking to blind people, I mean, they're literally blind if you send an email because they haven't even seen your face yet. So how you get your message across in a way that blind people understand is basically the cornerstone of what I do. And that's it. That's me.
Oh, fantastic. So if we start off with a question, so in the first one, in your book, The Jelly Effect, you start teaching people about the importance of targeted and clear communication. Mm-hmm. So in that context, how do you feel about email marketing as a route to sales?
It definitely has its place, but it's got to be done well. And like any sort of selling, asking for referrals is a good idea unless you're asking a bad way. So anything's got to be good. Unfortunately, we've all been on the receiving end of some rubbish sales emails. So it's very easy to find everybody out there says emails are a bad thing. Of course, they're not a bad thing. They're a very good thing if they're done well. And even something as trivial sounding, but as important as the beginning and the end, you've got to have an engaging title or they won't open the thing. So if you call it meeting request, the odds of someone opening it are quite low, really. And at the end, you've got to have a call to action, which either says, please ring me up or I'll ring you. But most emails don't do this. So the title's boring, so it doesn't get opened, or the email's okay, but then at the end, it doesn't say, call me or I'll call you. And so it doesn't lead to anything. So it absolutely has its place, but it's got to be done well.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. A lot of people just focus on the either on getting the subject line right, the right time to send, or getting the data right. But it's about joining everything together, isn't it? Because unless all of those elements work together, it's not going to generate the results, and people aren't going to want to open it.
Yeah, and you've got to focus on the outputs of it. So many people, it's a bit like cold callers. Very often you say to a cold caller, "Have you had a good day?" And they go, "Yeah, I've made 50 calls." Or you say to an email, "Have you had a good day?" "Yeah, I've sent out 50 emails." You go, "No, that's the input. Like, what's the output? How many meetings have you booked? How many replies have you got?" And one of the key things to do with any sort of, just as you said then, Simon, with anything you do is you've got to measure the outputs of it. Yes, the inputs are important, but the outputs more so. So I say when you're working with, when I'm working with people who do cold calling, I say the only thing you want is to trigger enough interest with a relevant person so they'll have a chat with you next week. So don't see yourself as someone who's a cold caller. Your job is to get called to. That's your job. And if you write an email, your job is to get replies. It's not to write emails. And once you start from going backwards and working backwards, of course, it's much easier.
Yeah. Again, I think you're right. I kind of class in email terms things like your open rates, your click rates. I very much class those as vanity metrics because they don't really tell you anything. For me, I want to see the engagement. The end of that engagement from a software perspective is when somebody talks to you. Because when it comes to it, people buy from people, don't they? Yeah. So I want to see people going off onto the website, looking at things, which pages are they looking at. So we start to see that broader picture. So we're informed with the intelligence so that when they do come to you or when you reach out to somebody to tell you the sales, it generates more of a informed conversation. Wouldn't you say that's?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So what would you say in your experience how effective do you think companies are in general with doing their email marketing from two perspectives? One from an SME level and one from sort of a larger, more successful enterprise level.
Well, it's really mixed. It's one of the most polarizing things there are. There's plenty of organizations of both sizes who are dreadful at it, like just beyond dreadful. And the difference between a big organization and a small organization is the big organizations tends to have nicer graphics, but the content's still rubbish. So I'm not saying every organization is like that, but absolutely you can have good or bad at both extremes. The thing, as you say, like every part of your email has to be compelling. It's a bit like, I speak at conferences a lot, and you absolutely have to nail your opening 3 or 4 sentences. By all means, ad-lib a bit as you go through, but if your opening 3 or 4 sentences don't quite work, you've got 10,000 people who are going, oh no, the next hour's going to be rubbish. And even worse, I, as the speaker, are thinking, oh no, the next hour is going to be rubbish. So that first 3 or 4 sentences, or with an email, the title and the introductory paragraph is so pivotal to whether someone thinks, oh no, this is going to be rubbish or not. We've absolutely got to get that right. And too little is done to guarantee that's right. And too little is done with things like split testing. People don't do that enough. Or they ask questions like, do you like that email? I don't care if my colleague likes the email because my colleague works for me. So my colleague's biased anyway. I'm better off ringing 3 or 4 of my customers who I like. And I say, I'm thinking of sending this email out. Can I bang it over to you? And you let me know how it feels from a customer point of view. So everything I'm saying, everybody will go, well, that's obvious. And then you say, yeah. And does your company do it all the time?
Yeah. And I think I know where you're going to come back with the answer on this one. But what would you say is a good response back to know when it's working, when your email's working?
Say again, sorry.
What would you say would be a good response back from those customers to know when it's actually working, rather than that sort of vanity, someone just saying something nice?
Yeah, so it's important you ask the right question. Because if you say, what do you think of my email? They'll just go, yeah, it's fine. So you think of the outputs you want. So the outputs you want, let's say, are either to click through to a website link or to hit reply and say, yeah, give me a ring. So let's say that thing. So your first question is, when you read this, did you think, yeah, I'll click on the website? Number 2, did you think you could be bothered replying, say, yeah, give me a ring? So you always ask questions about the outputs. You don't just ask the vanity questions of, did you like it? Did you think my syntax was wonderful? Did it make you stop and think for a minute? I don't want people to stop and think and go away. I want people to stop and think, say, that's useful. I need to speak to him now. So they're the questions you have to ask. Don't ask the generic, did you like it or not? It's, would you take action after reading it?
Brilliant. And what sort of intelligence do you use as well? Do you use any sort of intelligence from the software to gauge your decisions?
I don't, because that's not the way my business tends to work particularly. So I would defer to your brilliance with that.
I know. Thank you very much.
You use that one.
I know that what we do is we track and follow them when they go onto the website. Mm-hmm. So that you can see exactly what they're interested in. So, because what we find is that often when someone clicks on the button to say, yes, I want this, but then they go off onto the website and they start looking at all the free trials, they start looking at maybe case studies, they start drilling down. You get really intense, especially when they come back 2 weeks later, 3 weeks later, and that's all then tied up with the CRM. That's sort of intelligence we like to see people having. And would you say that would support a sales team?
Of course, absolutely. Yeah. And depends on what you're selling, of course. I mean, most of the sales emails I do are for my own company, so I don't need that as much as maybe other organizations might. So, yeah, absolutely. And anyone who was getting involved with emails where you might want people going on websites and so on, I would suggest very strongly they speak to someone like you. In fact, no, someone exactly who is you, and just have a chat with you and just give them some ideas just to open their mind to this stuff.
Yeah, no, we're always happy to do that, so thank you for that. On this sort of line, sales is obviously an absolutely vital tool to get people across the line. But before they reach out to the sales department, how much of a decision do you think they've actually, how much of a decision have they made before coming to you?
Well, it depends. But very often what happens, if you think of when someone's buying something decent, there's a bit of pain going on and there's not enough pain. And all of a sudden, people think, oh, actually, there is enough pain. We need to act now. So the bosses tend to get the minions together and say to the minions, we need to get this sorted out, go to market and find a solution. Now, the boss might say to the minions, and I particularly like Simon's company to use that, in which case that's the end of the minions' work done. And sometimes the bosses say, I think the answer to this is a webinar. So go and find a webinar provider. So the traditional way of doing it, bosses call minions and minions go out and they're influenced by what the boss thinks. Now that's okay, but the trouble if you are then involved with a sale then is you are coming in when it's the minions, not the decision makers. And also they're kind of doing what the bosses are talking about, they think, so they're influenced by the bosses. And often minions are more cost conscious than sometimes bosses are, who sometimes are more value conscious. It depends on the organization, a massive generalization, but you know the point I'm making. So I had an email come through yesterday from an organization I've worked with in the past, from their central procurement person, with a very vanilla thing saying, we're looking for some training and sales presentation skills. Would you like to submit an RFP? And I just thought, nope. Because what's happened there is some boss at this organization has said to the people, go out, cast your net around and find some people who'll do. They might have said, I think you should use Andy Bounds. They might have said, I think you should use somebody else, but get 3 or 4 names. Andy Bounds will do. He'll probably drag everybody else's prices up or down, just whatever. And so I don't like coming in then. The great thing about what you're suggesting, the proactive way of approaching people, is you often get them before the pain has reached a big enough point, which is great because then you've saved them extra pain. Or you go to the bosses who before they go to the minions so you can influence that decision. The trouble with selling is if you go after the minions, you're talking to cost-conscious people who think they're doing what the boss wants. Actually, the main thing they're interested in is job preservation. So they're probably going to go with the company they feel is least risky to their careers. Well, that's not a very comfortable place to sell.
So when you're in that situation, what would you say is the best way to get yourself away? If you can't get hold of the decision maker initially, what's the best way to get past the minion to speaking to that decision maker?
So it's like any objection at all, because the minion will give you the objection. You can't go past me because the boss has given it to me and I'm so important that if I let you past, I don't look as important and it's bad for my self-esteem and my morale and I'm going against what my boss says and so on. So you're fighting against that. So you have to appeal to the minion self-interest. So, and then it's just a question of working out the words you're going to use. It's like any objection. If you're worried about the objection about price, the only way to get rid of that objection is for you to convince yourself that price isn't an issue and then work out a script to say to remove their concern about price. Yeah. So you convince yourself and then you work out your script to convince them. So the order is number 1, convince yourself. Number 2, get a script. So if you're talking to a minion, the first thing you have to think is, why is it in the minion's interest to let me speak to the boss? I know why it's in my interest, but why is it in the minion's interest? Because otherwise, however I phrase it, I'm going to basically say, you aren't as important as I want to speak to. Now move out of the way, little person, so I can let the adults have a chat. You know, so firstly, you have to convince yourself, why is it in the minion's interest? And you think, well, why will it be good or bad for the minion if I speak to the boss or not? And then you begin to think, well, hold on. If me and the minion agree something and the minion hammers my price down and the minion goes to the boss and says, I found a really cost-effective solution by someone who just caved on price straight away. Aren't I clever? Well, probably the boss is not going to like that, actually. And also the boss is probably going to ask the minion a couple of questions that the minion didn't ask me. And then the minion's going to feel stupid and have to come skulking back and da-da-da. Oh, right. It is in the minion's interest for me to speak to the boss. Haha. Right. Step 1 done. I'm now convinced myself. And then step 2 is then what's the script? And the script has to appeal to the minion. So I might say something like this. I'd be delighted to be considered for this. But there's a couple of things that we need to do. Obviously with this, the ultimate decision maker always has a point of view that neither me nor you know. And the reason for that is they won't know exactly what they want until they see what their options are. And then they go, aha. And in my experience of doing this, whenever they go, aha, they always ask a question that we haven't thought about. And neither of us want that. It doesn't make you look good in front of your boss. Doesn't help me either. So it's obviously important that me and the boss get together at some time with you, because I want it to be a 3-way chat. And to be honest, I'd be astounded if any other consultant didn't say the same thing. So what's the best way to get me and you and the boss together? Or something like that. So what's happening is you can see I'm positioning from their point of view. I haven't said it exactly, but what I've implied is if we go the way you're thinking, you're about to look stupid when the boss asks you a question. Yeah. But by saying something as well, like, and I'd be astounded if any other consultant didn't ask that, it's showing it's a perfectly valid thing for me to say, but also if anybody else doesn't do it, they might begin to think, why hasn't he asked me that? Because Andy asked me to do that. I find that works for me. Now, what I would say to everyone is, whether you like my scripts or not, I don't know how to say this without sounding horrible. I don't care whether you like my scripts or not, everyone. But what I do care about is, number one, you convince yourself, and number two, you get a script that you're happy with. Because if you convince yourself and then your script is right, what you'll find is you maximize the chance of getting past the minion.
Cool. No, I think that's a really nice point, because obviously you're playing to you're massaging their ego, two, you're approaching their fears. So both ways they're going to let you through the gatekeeper. I think one of the key things you've just said there, it's about approaching the person, really, isn't it? It's about listening and understanding what that person needs to hear, and then helping engage them to go forwards. And I think from my point of view, it's exactly the same with emails. Because if you send that generic email out, kind of a bit like you say in your book about throwing the jelly at the wall and hoping something sticks, nobody's going to pay attention to any of that. What you need to do is use the intelligence to sort of, and exactly as you've just said, to drive that conversation. And when someone starts having that conversation, that engagement, that's when we see people step over the line and start wanting to talk more.
And you're so right there, because when you look to engage people, you have to look at what properly engages them. So the example I gave with the Minion was not, this is great for the company's future, because the boss is interested in that. The Minion will say they're interested in that, but ultimately the Minion's interested in self-preservation and not messing this up. Yeah. And so, and I will be the same as well. You know, so the boss in our house is my wife. So if I go to her and I do something which is a dreadful mistake, then I'll quickly wish I hadn't done it. So I'm not thinking of the family good. I'm thinking, just don't mess this up, this buying decision for what we're getting in the garden or whatever it might be. So you absolutely need to make sure that you've properly focused on what the other person's interested in. Minion probably wants to look good, definitely doesn't want to look bad. If you speak to the boss, they're probably interested in, is they good for the business? Is it going to make them look good? Might it come and bite them on the backside if it doesn't work? When you're sending an email, again, you want the title to be something they're most likely to open. I mean, I know we're going to come on to this later, but very simply, I think the two easiest ways to get emails opened is, number one, you use a mutual connections name, or number two, you use a recent post they've written on, say, LinkedIn. So if I want to speak to you and we have a mutual connection called Dillis, if I speak to Dillis and say, Dillis, I want to speak to Simon, but I don't know how to approach him. Do you mind if I use your name in an email? And Dillis says, yeah, that's fine. Well, if I include an email title to you, which is called Simon, Dillis suggested I email you ... because that's fine, you're likely to open it because Dillis is your friend. It accelerates trust. You want to know what Dillis has been talking about. If I call it meeting request, I've got no hope. Yeah. Similarly, what else would appeal to you? Well, if you write a post on LinkedIn called, I don't know, the 7 deadly sins of email marketing. If I direct message you, not a comment for everyone to read, but direct message you and say, a quick question about your 7 deadly sins post, ... What a brilliant email title that is. What's the only reason for posting anything on LinkedIn? That somebody gives a toss. So if someone replies, so I've got a question about your post, there is no chance of it not being open. Now, of course, that's very personalized, and some organizations won't be able to personalize stuff to that extent. But imagine if every single email you sent either had a mutual connection or a recent post or a bit of news about them. You can use that to get people hooked in so they open the thing up.
Yeah, no, we find exactly the same thing. So obviously when you're dealing with much larger databases, you can't get that personal.
Yeah.
But we find that by looking at understanding the intelligence where people are engaging, we can then break that database down and literally send out, instead of sending out to thousands, it goes out to dozens of people. So we're actually sending messages out that they're genuinely interested in right this moment, and use autoresponders to automate them and take them down that route. Mm-hmm. So one of the questions I suppose I would ask is, let's say we've got past that gatekeeper now, the decision maker, and we've got to speak to the decision maker. Is there anything that you would like businesses to do before you have that conversation? You thinking using their CRM, using their email to support the call before they go in there?
Oh my word, yes. As a minimum, before you go in, there are 5 things to prepare before any sales conversation at all with a decision maker. So I'm going to fly through these very quickly. If you want to ask about any of them, feel free. The 5 are, number 1, work out your opening sentence. I know it sounds obvious, but your opening sentence is your first impression. Most salespeople mess that up. They go in and say to a very busy person, thank you for sparing the time. And they think they're being polite, but the first thing they've done is they put them on a pedestal. Like the customer didn't say to you, thank you for sparing your time. So straight away, they don't want somebody deferential. They want somebody valuable. So you don't start off with that. Second thing you prepare, most salespeople don't do this at all, is questions to ask. Because what happens is salespeople often prepare what they want to talk about, but they don't prepare what they're going to ask. Well, if you prepare what you're going to talk about, maybe backed up by some slides, you've got a wonderful rant about yourself, but the job of selling is not to lead with you, you lead people towards you. And the way you lead people towards you is with great questions. Now, anyone listening to this will probably go, well, yeah, that's obvious. But let me ask you, be honest, how often have you sat down for half an hour of your life and thought, what are the best questions I can ask to trigger an amazing conversation? And people very rarely do that. So you need a good start, you need good questions, good teaching. So again, there's lots of research that shows customers want to learn stuff when they meet salespeople. So find some facts out you can teach them, not just about you, but about what their competitors are doing, what's going on in other sectors, what's happening, what some customers of theirs have given feedback about, anything like that. There they go, oh, that's useful. The next thing is think about concerns, objections they might raise and work out how you're going to deal with them. So if you think someone's going to say, I hear all this, Andy, but we're on lockdown. There's only so many times I can be surprised when someone says the word lockdown. It's like, remember in the old days, we used to worry about the price objection. I miss them. Now it's things like lockdown, furlough, no priority, no budget. We might be going bust. We're just like battening down the hatches. We can't spend anything discretionary at the minute. I'm not talking to anyone without any hair. I don't know, whatever it is. So these are all the things that can come out. So good first impression, good questions, good teaching, work out your answers to the objections. And finally, the fifth one, and I do not know why salespeople don't practice this, you've got to think about how you're going to close the thing off. Just as you said before, with an email, you need a call to action or they won't take any action. It's exactly the same when you have the conversation. The worst way to end it is, well, thank you very much for your time and give me a tinkle if you'd like to at any point. Bye. You know, at the end, you have to be saying things like, well, it sounds like there's something for us to explore here. Let me go away and look at some of those things you've talked about. I can ask my other customers about things they found helpful. Maybe we can circle back and I can give you some free advice. How would that be? And so when you close something like that, the customer's thinking, yeah, I want to see you again. That was cool. You started off with a good first impression. You found out useful things about me. You taught me things. I'm no longer worried about the lockdown I was, and I'm really happy to meet you next week.
So would you, at that stage, when you think about the lead up to whilst doing that research, would you be sending them any additional information via email, or would you keep that very much as a personal conversation?
I do as little as possible by email beforehand. So I use the email to trigger the call. Like you said before, the call's the thing. And I use as little as possible. The way I think about emails is valuable and incomplete. So they have to have lots of value in them. So the customer goes, well, that's valuable. But also it has to be incomplete, because if it's totally complete, so I've seen people do things like 8 attachments and 9 web links and so on. Well, I don't need to speak to you now because I've read every single thing about you. But what I want is I want you to tell me something. I think, oh, that's useful. Oh, really? I've not thought of it like that. Oh, well, that is interesting. Yeah, okay, give us a call tomorrow. That's what the email should do. And I'm conscious if I send too many emails beforehand, or my customers send too many emails beforehand, it's verging from being incomplete to being complete. And the worst thing that could happen will be the morning of the meeting, the phone call, they get in touch and say, do you know what? I've just read your 17 emails again. I'm good, thanks.
Yeah. I agree. It very much, the email's kind of like a teaser, isn't it? You want to get them to the point where they're desperate to buy, desperate to know that final nugget of information. Yeah. And that's when you can use, as you're saying, use them to get them across that line and dive into much deeper conversations about it. Mm-hmm. And then obviously you've done your call to action there. If somebody's gone into, and I know you probably don't get this very often, but someone's gone into the, I'm not quite sure, I'm not ready yet field. Mm-hmm. How would you nurture them at that point?
Yeah, great question. So what happens is if you do my call to action at the end, they will either say definitely yes, definitely no, sod off, or probably not yet. And in my experience, the no sod off just doesn't happen because it wouldn't have got that far probably. So it's either yes or not yet. And if it's not yet, as you've just said, then what I don't want to do is leave it vague, because if you leave it vague, there was like no point having the meeting. The odds of them ringing up 3 weeks on Thursday going, it's now time, is like nil, you know?
Yeah.
So, or it's so close to nil, you're not losing anything by trying something. So what I do is this, because I'm thinking valuable and incomplete, during the conversation, I'm itching to say the phrase I said before, which is, I'll tell you what, let me look into that for you. Let me look at other companies I've helped, see what I did with them, see the value it brought, see what I can learn from that. And then when we speak again, I'll be able to give you some, some advice, for want of a better word, some really tailored advice. Now, if I bring that up at the end of the meeting and said, like I said before, I'm going to do something, it's very hard for someone to say, no, don't do that. And even then, if they say, well, I'm not sure I want to buy anything, I say, well, do you know what? That's absolutely fine with me. But for the sake of another 20-minute phone call, I'm happy to have a look around because it'll help you. You can stand on the shoulder of giants. You can listen to what my other customers did. And for the sake of 20 minutes, why don't we just put that in next week? If after then we decide we don't want to do any further, that's fine. 20 minutes? So it's almost unreasonable, not to say, as long as I've had a good first impression, I've asked good questions and I've taught them something and I've handled their objections and I'm closing it well. You can't avoid any of those 5 if you want to maximize the chance of call 2.
Cool. So I know that I agree with you totally. A lot of small businesses don't use any form of CRM. So when they're having these conversations, they're often just storing the information in the head, which gets lost. And what would you say was the biggest hurdle for most businesses from using CRM to store this information to make sure they don't lose on sales?
Well, either they don't have a system at all, or they do have a system which isn't very good, or they do have a system which might be good or bad, but the salespeople don't use it properly. They're the issues really. I mean, the alternative is they have a really good one that everyone uses it perfectly, and that's happy days. So of those, the one that I struggle with the most is when people don't have a system at all and say, look, even if you don't want one and you think it's too onerous and you think it's too expensive and your salespeople won't use it to start with, you do need more discipline than none. Yeah. So if you want to do the most basic CRM system in the world, this is what you do. At the end of every day, I mean, I still do this now, as well as my own CRM stuff. We do what we call 5 at 5. And at 5 p.m. every day, I look back over that day and I spend 5 minutes. So it's 5 minutes at 5 o'clock. So my 5 at 5, I look at every single meeting I've had, every single phone call, every single email, every single everything. And I do one of 2 things beginning with D. I either do the follow-up or I diarize the follow-up. So after our conversation today, you'll probably get an email coming through tonight, which will say, hi, Simon, I really enjoyed our chat. Hope it was everything you needed. If you need anything else, here's a couple of links for you. Love you, miss you, bye. Now, you might think, oh, my word, Andy's thinking about me at 5:30. Well, yeah, but also the 5 at 5 reminds me to look back over that day. And if I then want to send an email in a week to say, how's everything going? I'll just put a reminder a week from now. So I have a diary entry called Stuff to Do. And it's like a half an hour diary entry every day called Stuff to Do. And so I want to follow up this in a week. I'll just bang it in next Tuesday or next Wednesday, which says, email Simon, see how he's doing. Yep. And so when it comes there, I open up that week's Stuff to Do. And there's like 8 different bullet points. Email Simon, email Janice, call Jonathan, da-da-da-da-da. And so that is not hard. It takes me 5 minutes a day, which means 5 minutes is nothing, and every single thing I do, I always follow up on the day without fail. And I always diarize my next thing without fail. So that way nothing ever drops. Now, you might not want to invest in a CRM system. I do suggest people do actually. But even if you don't invest in a CRM system, you've got your Outlook calendar and you can do 5 at 5. So if salespeople choose not to, in effect, they're choosing to give themselves more work actually. If they don't do that, because it's 5 minutes, it's nothing, it's 5 minutes, it's nothing. But what happens is with those 5 minutes, it means that my follow-up's always done and it's always easy and I never forget anything, like ever. And it's 5 minutes a day. Now, if you don't do that, you're hoping your brain remembers next Tuesday, or you better email Simon. What are the odds of me thinking about you next Tuesday? I love you, Simon, but I'm doing other stuff next Tuesday and you might not pop in my head. It's not your fault. You couldn't be lovelier than you are, but I'm focusing on the people I'm talking to next week unless a reminder comes up. So if you can't be bothered using CRM in any way, at least do 5 at 5 and use your diary because it's so easy.
Yeah, I think there's an interesting stat out there. An average SME is losing £70,000 a year because they don't use it.
I'm not surprised. Yeah.
Lost sales, missed opportunities, all that sort of stuff, and it's so easy to to do, as you sort of say, even if it's just using that sort of 5 at 5 tactic, or that it's going to find a simple to use system. But I think from what I'm hearing you saying is the best way to do it is find the system that works for you and
Yeah.
is simple to use, would you say?
Absolutely, yeah. So those are the two criteria. It's got to fit with you and it's got to be simple to use. So it's like, that's a much more beautiful way of saying what I said before when I gave an example of a script to say to the Minion, and I said, and if you don't like my script, I don't care, get your own. What I really meant was choose something that works for you and make sure it's simple. So yours is nicer phrasing of the same point. One of the problems that you often find, I find with salespeople, is they look at what other salespeople are doing, and often the impressive ones, you look at that and think, well, I can't do that. You know, I mean, Simon clearly knows more about emails than I ever will. Andy seems to be really good at handling objections more than I ever will, and I can't copy that. And you think, no, your job isn't to copy that. What your job is to find something that works for you and is easy to use. So if the 5 at 5 and using your Outlook calendar works for you, crack on. If it doesn't, I don't care. But you have to find something that works for you. And the 3 words I always advise people as far as CRMs go is this: more than nothing. All right. So if you want, you can invest £4 billion to get the world's best CRM, but you've got to do more than nothing. You can't just see someone and not follow it up. That's just nuts. It's like a football team that keeps playing but then doesn't shoot.
Yeah, do you know what? I totally agree. It just reminded me of a conversation I had with somebody 2 days ago. They approached us about the CRMs, and they're firing all these questions. They've obviously done their research. As I say, a lot of people do the research before they reach out. But they said to me, will this system be right for me in 5 years' time? I don't know. I think for me, the key thing is you've got to choose the CRM that's right for you. And this goes to any system, but the system that is right for you now and what's going to get you there rather than what's right for 5 years' time.
Yeah, it's funny that phrase. Just when you said 5 years, reminds me, I remember going to a petrol station in Reading about, well, it might be 5 years ago actually. And I went in and I said to this guy, could he give me change for £20 note? I wanted to change it into 4 5s or something. And he says, no, mate, we don't really do that because in 5 years' time, it's going to be a cashless society. And I thought, I'm sure it is, but it isn't now. And I want some £5 notes. And I just thought that was such an odd thing to say. I mean, you know, so it's a bit like, will that be right? In fact, remember, I did a sales pitch for one of my customers recently. And they said that someone who came in before me, the first thing they did was put a slide up with quite a big price on and said, okay, before we go anywhere, that's the price. Does that scare anyone before we go into the meeting? I thought, I understand the logic of that because, you know, we can hit price on the note. But that's like me saying to you, I've got something in my garden for £2,000. Do you want it? I don't know what it is. You know, so you do sometimes hear people do these things and you think, like, don't just copy everything you hear. Just think, will it work for me? And is it easy to do? And when you say, will it work? It means will you get the outcomes? So not will it work? Will I send out 300 emails? Will it work? Will some people reply?
Yeah. And as you say, it's measuring those outcomes as well and keeping those measures really, really simple. So one of the things we do is we do all the normal statistics, but we put hot, warm and cool leads, and that's just based on engagement. So people can say, right, I've sent this email, I've got 30 hot prospects come from it. Those are the people I pick the phone up and speak to, or those are the people I target. It makes life a lot simpler for our users. One of the questions I was going to go to next is, what would you say is the biggest hurdle it comes to when salespeople what's the biggest hurdle for salespeople using CRM on an ongoing basis?
Remembering to use it, really, and not resenting it when they do. So, for example, some salespeople using the CRM is a bit like our child 4. We don't give them names anymore, just child 4. Our child 4 eating vegetables is definitely good for him. And we can remind him every meal to eat his vegetables first, and we can shove the vegetables to it. And then we end up with the compromise of saying, fine, just have like 3 peas and all that sort of stuff. It's good for him. He needs it, but he doesn't really want it. And so one of the biggest problems I find with salespeople is they don't always want it. And the boss can say, yeah, but we need it for a business, but you don't really want it. It's a bit like I need a wig, but I don't want hair. Hair's not been too good for me over the years. So if a wig salesperson saw us both, strangely, they're better off talking to you because you might fancy having some long blonde locks for a change. There's no point talking to this bald man about wigs. I need hair, but I don't want it. So what we have to do with the salespeople is educate them why it's in their interest to complete it. And then once they realize it's right for them, we then have to make it easy for them. So, for example, one very simple way, I'm very happy with 5 at 5. That's my way to do it. I always say when I work with salespeople and say, when you fill in the CRM, your choice is to do it when your brain is flying or when your brain is not flying. Which do you want to do? And almost always people say, well, when it's flying, because otherwise it takes twice as long. You say, okay, so when is your brain at its best every day? And they go, don't know, 8:30 in the morning. Go, right, there you go. Put that in the diary. Do me CRM stuff, 8:30 in the morning. Go. And if they go, yeah, but I don't want to, like child force saying, yeah, but I don't want to eat vegetables. It's like, you've got to eat them at some point. So you either have them before your food you like or after your food you like, but you've got to have them at some point. And in the end, it comes up, they're going in. So you choose what's best for you. And it's very much like that with CRM. It's got to go in. So but if we don't educate people why it's in their interest, it'll be like my child for thinking he gets the logic, but doesn't really want to do it. He gets the logic, but he doesn't really want to do it.
It's exact same. When you go to put that information into the CRM, it's not about putting the whole plate full of vegetables in there. It's just keep the information really simple, isn't it? Put the salient bits of information. So when you come to follow up, it's not effort to actually read the notes and take and follow up from and understand what you need to do to action it. So then it becomes less of a churn.
Yeah, and to keep it as simple as possible. I mean, like the way I tend to think of sales is like ABC. So A, you find where the customer's going to be after you've done the work. B, you then build certainty to prove that they'll get the afters, and then C, you close it off. So find the afters, build certainty, close. Every salesperson got their own version of that. Find the needs, prove you can do it. So ABC. So with my CRM, it's based on that because that's my sales methodology. So with the heading afters, there's a subheading which says, what are the customer's main priorities? And then underneath it says, and what are the measures of success? And underneath that says, what's it worth to them? Because they're the 3 questions I need to know. As long as I know what they want, how we'll measure it, and what it's worth, then they're the main things I need to know. So that reminds me when I go in the CRM, I'm grateful for having my version of the CRM because when I look at that, I go, I forgot to ask that. So when I'm next on the phone to them, so actually the CRM reminds me of the best practices that I know I should be doing. So therefore it's in my interest to go and populate it because it makes sure I've got everything in that I need.
Yeah, and as you say, perhaps that's a simple way of doing it. Follow those 3 steps. So keep it very simple. Answer the A, B, and C in each one of those CRM inputs. That way you're not worrying about having to capture too much or too less information. Yeah. Just all salient information. So on that score about you using your CRM, how do you go about targeting prospects?
So the way we do it is for our organization, we're a bit different than maybe many of the people who are listening to this. So because of what my customers buy from me, it's quite hard to go totally cold because a lot of what I do involves trust that it's going to work and that they're going to like me and I'm going to like them and it's worth us working together. And so I tend to do a lot of my stuff through referrals. So what I do is I use my CRM and my emails and all that sort of stuff to help me get referrals. So I'm more of a referrals kind of person than emailing strangers kind of person. So all I do is, I just look at what's that saying? The customers you want are like the customers you've got. Yeah. So I just look at all the customers I've got, see what the common elements are, and then I work hard to get referrals from those. So simple example, we do lots of work with organizations in regulated industries because they're not always very good at communicating and selling well because their regulation feels they stifles their creativity sometimes. So we work with banks and lawyers and pharmaceutical companies and insurance companies and all that sort of stuff. So all I do is I just go and have a look and say, well, we work with people like that. So I need more of those. So then it's just a bit of searching around to find organizations that are like that. And then I go and think, all right, I need to speak to these people. And then the way it works for my organization is rather than emailing them cold, what I do is I then say, do I have any mutual contacts there? Because if I've got mutual contacts, I'll go to them and say, could you refer me in? So that's my approach. But if anyone listening to this might not think that doesn't sound right for our organization, the thing that will be right for your organization is the customers you want are probably like the customers you've got. So analyze what you've got, find the common traits, and then think, right, we need more of them. If you work with 6 banks, go to the other 6 banks.
Yeah, I think from our point of view, I agree with you entirely. We aren't that niche down. We don't target so specifically, but we do target. We have specific industries, specific sectors we work really nicely with. So one of the things we tend to do is we'll use and I know this is not quite right for you, but we use the intelligence where we can see someone's been going and looking at the specific case studies on our website, or they've been looking at specific pages, and that'll then tell us what they've been looking at, and then that's all pulled into the CRM, so we can then filter those people out, and which enables us to have the conversations and find the people, exactly as you're saying, you need to have a conversation with.
Great. And it's really interesting. I mean, anyone listening to this will see there's two sort of really different approaches, but, you know, clearly they work. And again, we go back to your wonderful summary before: find something that works for you, which is relatively easy to do. You know, one thing that might work for me is if I was going to do a one-to-one Zoom coaching session with all my clients every single minute of every single day. Well, that might work, but my word, that's not easy at all. So you need to find something that works for you. So it's great to hear these two different extremes. I can absolutely, if I sold what you sold, I would do what you do. It sounds a really good, you know, the obvious way to do it, really, but most people don't do it that way.
Oh, fantastic. And we've covered it a bit earlier on, but what behaviours do you look for in your, as sort of buying prospects or buying signals from people?
The main one is excitement, really. So when we talk about what they're looking to achieve, I'm quite an excitable chap. I mean, you can probably tell I've got quite a bit of energy and I'm bouncing around and stuff. So when I'm talking to people, I want there to be excitement about the afters. So firstly, do I know what their afters are, where they want to be after me? Do I understand the measures? Do I understand what it's worth and all that good stuff? And is that exciting to both me and them? Now, when I first started, I'll be really honest, when I first started, the only thing I cared about really was, number one, did they have a pulse? And number two, did they have a purse? Because to start with, I didn't have any money and I needed it to work. So my needs have changed over the years. Now I'm fine. I mean, I like them to have a pulse, of course, that would be nice. But I don't think anyone with money is a good potential customer for me. They have to have afters that they are excited about, afters that I can and I'm excited about delivering. And if we get past that, then I'm happy to carry the conversation on. If I'm talking to someone and I could deliver what they want, but I'm not quite sure I want to work with them, or there's not enough buzz about it, then that's where I say I'm probably not your guy, but these three people are very good. You might want to have a chat with them. So that's totally personal. I'm only answering the question in a very personal way. Most people that wouldn't be right for.
I think I completely agree with you. For me, it's about finding the fit, because someone can have the budget, they can have the pain, but if there's not the fit between you and that person, it's never going to work, is it?
No,
and you're just setting yourself up for failure.
Yeah. And the way I work is I'm quite relaxed about stuff. So a lot of people who do my job charge by the hour. I hate that. I'm a flat fee kind of guy. And the reason I hate it is because it puts you in conflict with the client. You know, the client wants quick sales. And if I say, oh, you just need to buy 6 more days of my time, the client doesn't want me to book loads of days. The client wants me to do it in no time at all. So a lot of the people who I compete against do the traditional time model, which is fine. I get it. I have massive respect for it. You know, all the big consultancies in the world use it, so it can't be rubbish. But it just doesn't feel quite right to me. So you have to feel something that is right for you and it's right for your clients, and then you'll be able to talk about it in an appropriate way.
Yeah. I think that's the key thing as well. You don't always do the same as your competition, do you? It's about standing out, being different. Yeah.
There's a really good TED talk by Malcolm Gladwell, you know, the Tipping Point author. And he talks about David and Goliath. And basically the only thing anyone knows about the story of David and Goliath, even when I said the phrase David and Goliath, everyone listening to this will think, oh, it's the underdog winning. That's what David and Goliath's about. And then he tells a story that actually David was pretty much a ninja with his slingshot. I mean, if you remember, he was a shepherd boy who used to protect his sheep from wild animals. So you've got to be pretty good with a slingshot if you can kill a lion that's about to eat. So he's brilliant at this. And also Goliath, with respect to Goliath, yes, he was tall, but he was a bit of a lumbering giant. So when they were saying to David, do you want to put on this armor and go toe-to-toe with Goliath? He goes, no, I'll go and stand on that hill over there. And basically, he threw the thing so hard, it's basically like a gun. You know, it's like a bullet. And so the only thing we know about it, David was the underdog. But actually, Goliath really was a sitting duck, because basically you got this massive guy standing there. David's on the top of a hill, firing bullets at his head. There was only ever going to be one winner. And it's a brilliant analogy, because what it does, it just makes you rethink this. The only thing you know about David and Goliath, it's the underdog. And the point Malcolm Gladwell makes, I mean, it's like a 15-minute talk, but he tells 14 minutes about the story. And I wish he'd developed the final minute more, because the final minute says, so when you are selling, don't look at what the Goliath, the big organization's doing, put your armor on and go toe-to-toe with them, because you just get beaten up. What you do is you think, what am I super good at? Firing slingshots. and then go and stand over there and fire slingshots. So the thing we do is we often see what big companies do or impressive companies do, and we try and copy them. But that's just going toe to toe with Goliath, and you will lose. Yeah. So instead, you think, what is unique about us? What do we have that no one else can do? So one of the unique things about me is me. I've got a blind mum. I've won awards. I've written books. I know things other people don't. I don't like doing things the way other people do. If I go toe to toe with a big organization and they charge X per hour and I charge Y per hour, it means the customer's then thinking, we've got Goliath and we've got this guy here. They both fight in very similar ways. It's probably safer to go with the big guy. But if instead I'd take me slingshots over there and say, yeah, they're that way and they're brilliant and they're very successful and go with them if you want to, but my approach is like this. And if you think that's more for you, then I might be a viable alternative or it might be your best option. Well, all of a sudden that becomes more attractive to people. So I would say to anyone listening here, don't go toe to toe with the Goliaths because you'll get thumped. What you do is you think, what is unique about us? Like, teach them something. Think about your own personality. Write in a way in your emails that nobody else writes. If you can get a personal recommendation, that's great because it elevates you straight away. If you can follow up what they've shown interest in your website, well, Goliath isn't doing that because they might not have been on Goliath's website. So find something unique that the other customer will find valuable and then focus everything on that.
Yeah, I agree entirely. It's quite interesting. We find that exactly that in our business. So we sit in our marketplace, our sort of competition is at the lower end, we've got the likes of MailChimp, Trello, your spreadsheets, your Outlook, with all that data sort of disjointed. At the upper end, and that's what everybody knows there, the upper end, you've got the likes of HubSpot, Salesforce, all those systems. And people just seem to jump from one to the other because they think that's what they've got to do.
Yeah.
But there are options in the middle which they just need to take, and it'll be far better fit for the business.
Yeah. What's that phrase someone said? Like, everyone thinks the grass is greener on the other side. That's not right. The grass is greenest where you water it. Oh, do you like that? The grass is greenest where you water it. So don't just lurch from thing to thing to thing to thing. Like, just find something you think, oh, this is good, and then just water that, and that's where you'll get your best grass.
Great, and keep it simple and so you can actually use it.
Uh-huh.
And in conclusion to the interview, is there any tips that you could give our sort of listeners for how they could use email to sort of enhance their sales process?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, the main tip, there's nothing new here. It's all what we talked about before. Number one, make sure you're emailing the right person. The customer you want is like the customer you've got. Number two, you absolutely need a good beginning and a good end. So the title has to engage them. So you either say something about, I saw on our website you were interested in this, or the title says a mutual connection's name, or the title says I'm emailing following your post about whatever. So your title has to be engaging. Your call to action at the end has to have a call to action. None of this, if you're interested, let me know, rubbish. You know, it has to be, please let me know the best number to call you on. Or this is a nice ending. You say, with your agreement, I'll call you tomorrow morning for us to discuss this. I quite like doing that one actually, Simon, because when you say with your agreement, I'll call you tomorrow, that means the customer has to actively go, you do not have my agreement. No. So when I ring the next day, what's going to happen is the gatekeeper is going to ask the normal gatekeeper questions. Is she expecting your call? Yes, I sent an email yesterday. Does she know what it's regarding? Yes, it's in the email yesterday. Well, does she know you're calling this morning? Yes, I said I was going to do it in my email yesterday. Yeah, but is it a sales call? No, it's a helping call. I described it in my email yesterday. Well, did you say it was all right for you to ring? Well, I guess so, because I said with your agreement, I'll be doing it, and I haven't heard back. And so all the gatekeeper standard questions that get in the way, if you do an email which ends with your agreement, I'll call you tomorrow, then that's a really nice way just to get past all the objections you're going to get when you call. So email the person you want to email, do a bit of diligence on that. Good title, good ending. And as long as you do those three, there are other things as well, but without those three, sadly, you'll probably fail. But if you do those three, you've got a great chance of success.
Brilliant. Andy, thank you very much for your time today. And for those of you listening who want to find a bit more out about Andy, what's the best way for them to reach out to find out more about you, Andy?
Okay, thank you. A couple of ways, just email me, so andy@andybounds.com if you've got any other questions you want to ask me. If you've enjoyed this and want to learn from me, I've got an online sales training videos, and they're andyboundsonline.com. So its email is andy@andybounds.com, and the sales training videos are no, they're not. They are andyboundsonline.com. So either of those is fine. But to be honest, I'd just email me and then we'll have a chat.
Brilliant. And what I'll do is I'll put those links beneath this video, so anyone who wants to reach out, they can get in touch with you.
Cool.
Also, to our listeners who've hopefully enjoyed this interview, if you'd like to listen to more of these type of interviews or find out more information, please go to Popcorn, www.popcorn.email/BTE. That's BTE for behind the email. And there's plenty more interviews on there. But thank you, and Andy, thank you very much for your time.
No, you're welcome. I've enjoyed it. Thank you.